For this afternoon, we will have a lecture on systemic lupus erythematosus together with the vascular necrosis and antiphospholipid syndrome. So, SLE is relatively becoming popular now. So, this discussion will be a case-based. So, we have here a case of a 25-year-old female who had fever, hair loss, malaise, joint pains, and rashes. On physical examination, the patient is also having oral ulcers, mild alopecia, malar rash, swollen PIP and MCP joints. So with this presentation, diagnosis is SLE, and the patient was worked up accordingly. So CBC was done showing hemoglobin of 11.5 and a low WBC of 3.2. Urinalysis also showed a little proteinuria of +1, hematuria of 10 to 15, and WBC of 5 to 10. There is a noted elevation of ESR, and with the impression of SLE, anti-nuclear antibody test was done with a positive result at 1:160, 1:64 titer, and an elevated anti-dsDNA and low C3. So the patient was confirmed to have SLE. The patient was given prednisone 40 milligram per day and noted a good response. And patient was lost to follow up. When the patient had a good response, patient did not follow up. So SLE is an autoimmune disease with chronic inflammation in various organs, mediated by tissue-binding autoantibodies and immune complexes, and failure to regulate production of pathogenic autoantibodies which appear years before the first clinical symptom of disease. And clinical manifestations are usually heterogeneous, and it's said that no two lupus patients are the same. So this is the ACR diagnostic criteria for SLE. A patient must fulfill at least 4 out of 11. It may be serially or simultaneously for the diagnosis. So majority of the clinical criteria is skin manifestation. One is malar rash or butterfly rash, which are rashes seen at the malar eminences and spares the nasolabial folds. 2 is discoid rash, which is a raised erythematous patches with keratotic scaling, photosensitivity, oral ulcers, and these are usually painless ulcers. Arthritis is non-erosive with 2 or more peripheral joints with tenderness, swelling, and effusion. Serositis can be pleuritis or pericarditis, renal dysfunction, the form of proteinuria and presence of red cell cast. Neurologic dysfunction may be seizure or psychosis. Hematologic manifestation may be hemolytic anemia, leukopenia, thrombocytopenia, and lymphopenia. Immunologic is the presence of LE-PrEP or anti-DNA antibody or anti-SM. Nowadays, LE preparation is not available because it's very tedious to be prepared in the laboratory, and a positive anti-nuclear antibody. So with our patient, the patient fulfilled more than 4, includes malar rash, oral ulcers, arthritis, renal dysfunction, hematologic, immunologic, and positive ANA. So that confirms the diagnosis of this patient. The SLIC, or the Systemic Lupus International Collaborating Clinic, also developed criteria for classification of SLE, mainly for the purpose of research in cases of clinical trial, but it is usually used now. This is a combination of clinical manifestation and immunologic manifestation. So this is almost the same as the ACR classification criteria, and they just reorganized this manifestation. And for clinical manifestation, skin include acute, subacute cutaneous LE, chronic cutaneous LE, oral ulcers, there is alopecia, synovitis, renal, includes protein clear ratio of more than 0.5, RBC cast, and renal biopsy positive for lupus nephritis. Neurologic manifestation includes seizures, psychosis, mononeuritis myelitis, peripheral or cranial neuropathy, acute confusional state, hemolytic anemia, leukopenia, lymphopenia, and thrombocytopenia. For immunologic manifestation, positive ANA, dsDNA, anti-Smith, anti-phospholipid, low serum complement, and a positive direct Coombs test. Take note that renal biopsy is read as SLE or interpreted as SLE if it has lupus nephritis in its reading, and it is a standalone criteria. So even the patient will feel less than 4 if the patient is positive as lupus nephritis and renal biopsy. That is a diagnosis of SLE. So SLE is commonly seen in women than in men, with a 9:1 ratio, and 90% of women of childbearing age, usually diagnosed between 15 to 35 years of age, with an incidence of 4.6 per 100,000 population. So this is the pathogenesis of SLE. So it usually is a combination of predisposing factors like the genes and environmental, microenvironment, and epigenetics. So for the genes, there are a lot of genes associated with SLE. There are genes with high hazard ratio of more than 6, deficiencies in complement C1q, C2, and C4, enhancing innate immunity, including production of interferon, altered adaptive immunity by B and T signaling, and there are a lot of genes for lupus nephritis, such as HLA-DR3, STAT4, APL1, etc. So what are the environmental factors? Majority or most of the patient has exposure to ultraviolet light, smoking, crystalline silica, infection, viral infection like Epstein-Barr virus, and being a female. And epigenetics can be hypomethylation of DNA in CD4 plus T and B and monocytes. Some affect interferon production, histone modification, and microRNA affecting the gene expression. So with this predisposing factor, this may cause abnormal immune response with stimulation of the dendritic cell, further stimulating the T and the B cell, producing autoantibodies. And with the defective suppressive networks, there will be more autoantibody production. And these autoantibody immune complexes will cause inflammation to various organs and causing the rash, the nephritis, the arthritis, the leukopenia, the CNS involvement, carditis, and clotting. And if this inflammation is not addressed, this may cause damage. Damage that may cause renal failure, atherosclerosis, pulmonary fibrosis, stroke, and also there are damage due to treatment. So mainly risk factors, genetic susceptibility, and environmental factors. So if you will be asked what are the possible triggers, this may be the possible triggers that you may mention. So being systemic, it involves all system from nervous, musculoskeletal, cutaneous, down to the ocular. So these are the manifestations of SLE based on the involvement. So musculoskeletal can be arthralgias, erosive polyarthritis, hand deformities, myopathy, and ischemic necrosis of the bone. Cutaneous, much of the manifestations of SLE are cutaneous. So it can be photosensitivity, malarash, oral ulcers, alopecia, discoid rash, vasculitis, urticaria, and subacute cutaneous lupus. Blood vessels can be involved in the form of hypercoagulability and acute thrombotic events, accelerated atherosclerosis, ischemia of the brain caused by focal occlusion, embolization from carotid artery, and fibrinous vegetations in Lehmann-Sachs endocarditis. Hematologic can be anemia. It can be anemia of chronic disease. It can be hemolytic anemia, leukopenia, lymphopenia of less than 1,500, thrombocytopenia of less than 100, and there can be lymphadenopathy and splenomegaly. As to the pulmonary system, it can be pleurisy, lupus pneumonitis, interstitial fibrosis, pulmonary hypertension, ARDS, pulmonary hemorrhage, and shrinking lung syndrome. Pericarditis, in case of cardiac involvement, myocarditis, endocarditis, and can be coronary artery disease. This is Lehmann-Sachs endocarditis. GI can also be affected. It can be a non-specific manifestation like nausea, mild abdominal pain, and diarrhea. Sometimes the liver may be affected. There are autoimmune hepatitis, there will be abnormal liver enzyme, and there can be vasculitis of the gastrointestinal system. Ocular manifestations like Zika syndrome, conjunctivitis, scleritis, and vasculitis. Zika syndrome are dry eyes syndrome that can be seen. So some of the patient may be seen by ophthalmologists and may be referred to us for the diagnosis. So kidneys is one major organ that can be involved, and they may manifest as proteinuria, just like in this patient, active urinary sediments, presence of cellular cast, and hematuria. There can be nephrotic syndrome and end-stage renal disease. Neurologic manifestation can be from cognitive disorder down to transverse myelitis. Aside from cognitive disorder, there can be mood disorder, acute confusional state, headache, seizure, aseptic meningitis. It can be a demyelinating disease, Guillain-Barré, myasthenia. There can be mono or polyneuropathy, stroke in cases of hypercoagulable state, and movement disorders. So laboratory tests initially may be CBC, urinalysis, and request also for screening tests, anti-nuclear antibodies, and complement. So CBC will show anemia, can be autoimmune hemolytic anemia, and you can check for Coombs test. These are antibodies directed against RBC antigen. These are positive. They are positive. And maybe secondary to chronic inflammatory disease due to renal insufficiency, blood loss, or drugs. There may be also findings in the CBC of leukopenia and lymphopenia and thrombocytopenia. So it can be involvement of RBC, WBC, and platelet. Antibodies to WBC and lymphocytes and antibodies to the platelet causes this penias. Routine urinalysis, you want to see the RBC, the white cell, the protein, and the cellular class. So anti-nuclear antibody is higher than the normal titer, and usually there is lower complement due to the antigen-antibody complex. So these are the autoantibodies that may be requested. This is anti-nuclear antibody panel. Each antibody may correlate to disease association. So remember that ANA is the best screening test. This is just a screening test. And anti-dsDNA is high specificity for SLE, and it's correlated with renal disease. Anti-SMIT is specific for SLE. So when asked which is the antibody with high specificity for SLE, one is anti-DSA and another one is anti-SMIT. Anti-RNP are associated with syndromes of overlap features of several rheumatic syndromes. You also call that mixed connective tissue disease. So these are overlap features of two rheumatic disease. Example, you may have scleroderma and SLE at the same time. So these are mixed connective tissue disease. And usually you have a positive RNP. Anti-Ro, which is SSA, and anti-La are both associated with neonatal lupus and congenital heart plaque in the case of SSA. These are all both associated with Zika syndrome, so SSA and SSB. And anti-La has low prevalence of renal disease. Antihistone is drug-induced SLE. You usually request for antihistone if you're thinking of a drug-induced SLE. Antiphospholipid are antibodies directed against phospholipid binding proteins, most commonly the beta-2 glycoprotein 1, associated with thrombosis, recurrent fetal loss, and thrombocytopenia. Antiplatelet are associated with thrombocytopenia. Antineuronal is positive for CSF. Positive CSF correlates with active CNS lupus. So if you're thinking of CNS lupus, you can get CSF antineuronal antibody. Antiribosomal P correlates with depression, psychosis due to CNS lupus. So this panel is important not only for the diagnosis, but also for prognostication. So this same patient came to us again 8 months after with progressive bipedal pitting edema. And laboratory shows that a mild proteinuria from the onset now has protein of +3. RBC of 30 to 40, pyorrhea of 10 to 20, RBC gas, hyaline cast, and granular cast. And the patient was sent for renal biopsy showing class 4 diffuse lupus nephritis with activity 15 and chronicity 2. So this is just an acute renal involvement. So this is the International Society of Nephrology, Renal Pathology Society in 2003 classification for lupus nephritis. Wherein WHO class 1 is minimal mesangial lupus nephritis, wherein normal glomeruli by light microscopy, but mesangial immune deposit by immunofluorescence. WHO class 2 is mesangial proliferative, purely mesangial hypercellular degree of mesangial matrix, expansion by light microscopy with mesangial immune deposit. A few isolated subepithelial and endothelial deposit may be visible by immunofluorescence or electron microscopy, but not by light microscopy. 3 is focal lupus nephritis, active or inactive focal, segmental, or global, endo or extracapillary glomerulonephritis involving the less than 50 of all glomeruli, typically with focal endothelial immune deposit with or without mesangial alteration. 4 is diffuse lupus nephritis with active or inactive diffuse segmental, global, endo or extracapillary involving equal or more than 50% of all glomeruli, typically with diffuse subendothelial immune deposit with or without mesangial alterations. This class is divided into diffuse segmental 4S, lupus nephritis, wherein more than 50% of involved glomeruli have segmental lesion, and diffuse global 4G, wherein more than 50% of the involved glomeruli have global lesions. Segmental is defined as glomerular lesion that involves less than half of the glomerular tuft, and this class includes cases with diffuse wire loop deposit, but with little or no glomerular proliferation. 5 is membranous nephritis. This is global or segmental subepithelial immune deposit or morphological sequelae by light microscopy and by immunofluorescence or electron microscopy. Class 5 nephritis may occur in combination with class 3 and class 4. Class 5 nephritis may show advanced sclerotic lesions. And class 6 is advanced sclerotic lupus nephritis, wherein more than 90% of glomeruli globally sclerosed without residual activity. So the patient was managed accordingly, and the management of lupus can be corticosteroid. You can use also NSAID, antimalarials, immunosuppressive agents, and immunomodulator. So we usually classify the patient, those with non-life-threatening condition and those with life-threatening SLE manifestation. So non-life-threatening, meaning no major organ involvement, constitutional manifestations like muscle pain, fatigue, arthritis, arthralgia, and some cutaneous manifestation is considered non-life-threatening. Life-threatening involves kidney involvement, proliferative lupus nephritis, CNS lupus, pulmonary hemorrhage, and systemic vasculitis. So, steroids should be given, can be prednisone, oral, and prednisolone. So you can give 0.07 to 0.3 milligram per kilogram body weight per day for milder disease, and 0.5 to 1 milligram per day for severe disease. Methylprednisolone sodium succinate for severe disease, and you call this methylprednisolone pulse therapy. This is given 1 gram IV once a day for 3 days. So these are the steroid preparation. They're equivalent glucocorticoid and with their mineralocorticoid activity. Take note that prednisone 5 milligram is equivalent to 20 milligram of hydrocortisone and 4 milligrams of methylprednisolone and triamcinolone. A 5 milligram prednisone is equivalent to the long-acting betamethasone 0.6 and dexamethasone 0.75. So take note that hydrocortisone is the highest mineralocorticoid activity among them, followed by prednisone and prednisolone and methylprednisolone with triamcinolone, betamethasone, and dexamethasone with 0. But glucocorticoid has adverse effect, and we have to know what are the adverse effects of giving glucocorticoid, especially the long-term steroid. So for the skeletal system, it may cause osteoporosis, steroid-induced osteoporosis, osteonecrosis, and myopathy. Gastrointestinal can be affected by steroids. Patient may have peptic ulcer disease, especially in combination with NSAID, may have pancreatitis or fatty liver. As to the immunologic manifestation, patients using steroid may have predisposition to infection, so higher risk of infection. They may be immunosuppressed, and there may be delayed hypersensitivity. Cardiovascular can be fluid retention, hypertension, accelerated atherosclerosis, and arrhythmia. As to the ocular, steroids may induce glaucoma and cataract formation. Cutaneous, there can be skin atrophy. They may have striae, ecchymosis. There may be impaired wound healing, acne, buffalo hump in cases of Cushing's, and hirsutism. Endocrine can be, they may appear as Cushingoid, may induce diabetes mellitus. There may be changes in the lipid metabolism, enhanced appetite, causing weight gain among them, electrolyte abnormalities, HPA axis suppression, and suppression of gonadal hormones. These steroids also may cause behavioral changes. They may cause psychosis, insomnia, emotional instability, and cognitive effects. So be aware of the common adverse effects of the steroids. And usually, if the steroids causing side effect, you may decrease the dose and look for other steroid-sparing agent. As a rule, you give the steroid at the lowest possible cost that will control the patient's disease activity. And you can stop the steroid if in case you are already having other steroid-sparing agent. And usually steroids are tapered slowly. As to the NSAID, arthritis, myalgia, and headache may be managed by NSAID, but take note, NSAID combined with steroid may cause GI irritation, and NSAID also may cause renal damage. As to the antimalarials, these are the first-line immunomodulatory agents in mild SLE, including constitutional, cutaneous, and musculoskeletal. So hydroxychloroquine is one antimalarial, usually given at 200 milligram per day. This is an initial treatment for the COVID-19, but now it's been stopped. Other forms of antimalarial that can be used is chloroquine, 250 milligram per day, and quinaquine, 100 milligram per day. So just take note of its possible side effects, the retina, and arrhythmia. Other immunosuppressive agents include cyclophosphamide, mycophenolate mofetil, and azathioprine. These can be used as step-down therapy for lupus nephritis. So immunomodulator consists of rituximab, belimumab. These are the newer monoclonal antibody. Rituximab is a chimeric monoclonal antibody that binds CD20 on the surface of B cell, which results in B cell depletion. So although rituximab is not approved as a treatment for SLE, including SLE nephritis, usually you use rituximab in case of those thrombocytopenia not responding to the ordinary treatment of steroid. Belimumab is the monoclonal antibody approved by FDA as a treatment for SLE. This is directed against ligand of the B cell, activating the factor BAFF and B cell stimulator, or the BLyS receptor on B cell that promotes B cell survival and differentiation to plasmablast. So this patient received methylprednisolone pulse therapy of 1 gram for 3 consecutive days, and later on maintained on prednisone at 1 milligram per kilogram body weight, having a major organ involvement, kidney involvement, and the patient was maintained on mycophenolate mofetil 2 grams per day, hydroxychloroquine, and given calcium and vitamin D supplement to prevent osteoporosis from the steroid. So what are the other advice to the patient? So patient must have regular exercise and even simple low impact movements. This may reduce or minimize the stress, can keep the heart healthy, improve muscle stiffness, increase muscle strength, prevents osteoporosis. So walking and stretching is enough for as an exercise for them, but always avoid the sunlight when doing the exercise. Rest is very important, especially during flares. So patient, aside from regular exercise, do not take or watch TV for a long time. Too much sleep may cause weakness of muscles and may cause fatigue, more fatigue. Remember to use sunblock, photo protection. Excessive exposure to the sun can cause lupus to flare. So if you ask patient to exercise, exercise when the sun is still down. Sunscreen with SPF 30 or greater is recommended. Always tell your patient to use protective clothing and umbrella and avoidance of sun exposure. A well-balanced diet is always recommended, including fruit and vegetable, more fiber, food rich in calcium, and milk. Avoid stress as much as possible because it can cause flares. Also, if the patient is smoking, tell them to stop smoking. Smoking causes poor wound healing, increased risk of coronary heart disease, increasing susceptibility to infection, magnifies the risk for osteoporosis, lessens the efficacy of drugs like hydroxychloroquine. So tell your patient to quit smoking. So it's always important for them that you advise them to avoid crowded places, wear mask, regular hand washing to avoid having infection or contacting infection, since patient is taking immunosuppressive agents and steroids. So this patient, after the pulse therapy, 4 months after, this patient developed bilateral hip pain. Patient felt pain more on the left than the right. And at that time, the patient is taking 30 milligram of prednisone and mycophenolate mofetil of 2 grams per day with hydroxychloroquine of 200 milligram and calcium plus vitamin D. The patient has a limping gait, and upon physical examination, patient has a positive Patrick's test bilateral, meaning there is hip pathology. So patient was worked up. An initial X-ray showed destruction of both femoral head and this patient is having osteonecrosis or avascular necrosis. Osteonecrosis is also called bone death. This is the final common pathway in the pathogenesis of osteonecrosis is disruption of blood supply to all the segment of the bone. So as seen in this picture, so this, and the femoral head is the most common site of osteonecrosis. That's why the patient is having hip pain. So avascular necrosis or osteonecrosis is linked to numerous conditions. Among them are corticosteroid use, just like in this patient, cigarette smoking, alcohol, use of bisphosphonate, trauma, fat embolism, pregnancy, diabetes, hyperlipidemia, presence of sickle cell, hemophilia, and other rheumatologic conditions like antiphospholipid syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, and also in SLE. So in this patient is a known case of SLE and using high-dose corticosteroid. And this may predispose the patient to develop a vascular necrosis. A vascular necrosis primary presenting symptom in osteonecrosis is pain and AVN of the hip may radiate to the groin and anterior thigh or knee. So in patient complaining of pain on the anterior thigh and knee, check also the hip on your physical examination. So AVN can be diagnosed using X-ray, CT scan, and MRI. And what you will see is the collapse of the femoral head, in this case, without joint space narrowing. So it's just the femoral head that is collapsed, which can also be seen as abnormality on a regular or a plain X-ray. But you can see here in MRI that there is collapse of the head. So treatment is surgery. Surgical cord decompression or total hip replacement or hemiarthroplasty is the treatment for avascular necrosis. So cord decompression of the left hip was done on this patient. So this patient diagnosed to have SLE, developing nephritis, and later on developing a vascular necrosis, now had left-sided body weakness. So the patient was noted to have left-sided body weakness, and patient was rushed to the hospital, and these are the initial workup. So the patient is worked up with anticardiolipin immunoglobulin and immunoglobulin G and M, which showed high titer, and a positive lupus anticoagulant. So with this patient presenting a stroke with SLE, a thorough history was done, and later on it was found out patient is had recurrent pregnancy loss in the past. So patient has 4 pregnancy losses. So in a patient with recurrent pregnancy loss and stroke, in a patient with lupus, you're thinking of antiphospholipid syndrome. And antiphospholipid syndrome is an acquired thrombophilia with recurrent arterial, venous, or pregnancy morbidity. Autoantibodies are directed against phospholipid-binding plasma protein, beta-2, glycoprotein, and prothrombin. So antiphospholipid can be primary or secondary. Primary APS occurs in a patient without connective tissue disease. 8% of primary APS patients later develop SLE. And those SLE patients who was positive for APL, positive thrombosis, and pregnancy losses is secondary APS, meaning the patient has hematologic disease prior to the diagnosis. This is secondary to There are 3 important autoantibodies for APS. One is antibody against cardiolipin. These are anti-cardiolipin. Antibodies against beta-2 glycoprotein. These are anti-beta-2 glycoprotein. And lupus anticoagulant. So this can be assayed using ELISA, the anti-cardiolipin and the anti-beta-2 glycoprotein. And lupus anticoagulant can be detected using the APTT, the activated partial thromboplastin time, the KCT or the Cowling clotting time, and the dilute Russell Viper Venom test, the RVVT. So these are the assessment for the detection of these autoantibodies. So this is the revised Sapporo classification criteria for antiphospholipid. And usually you need 1 clinical criterion and 1 laboratory criterion, which is persistent over 3 months. So 1 clinical criterion is thrombosis. Thrombosis can be arterial, it can be venous, or it can be vasculopathy. Pregnancy morbidity can be 3 or more first trimester losses or 1 or more late fetal losses or severely preterm birth due to placental insufficiency. In our case, our patient has 4 recurrent pregnancy loss. 1 laboratory criterion should be there for 3 months, lupus anticoagulant, or a moderate or high titer IgG or IgM, anti-cardiolipin, or a moderate or high titer IgG or IgM anti-beta-2 glycoprotein. So you need 1 clinical and 1 laboratory criterion for the diagnosis. What are the features of antiphospholipid syndrome? So venous thrombosis and related consequences may be DVT or deep vein thrombosis. It can be levator-reticularis as shown in this picture, pulmonary embolism, superficial thrombophlebitis. It can be thrombosis in various other sites. So arterial thrombosis and related consequences can be stroke, cardiac valve thickening or dysfunction or Liebman-Sachs vegetation, TIA or transient ischemic attack. It can also be a form of myocardial ischemia, infarction or angina, and coronary bypass thrombosis, and leg ulcers and digital gangrene as shown in this picture. So this can be a feature of antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, and can be arterial thrombosis in extremities, retinal artery thrombosis, ischemia of the visceral organs, or a vascular necrosis, so multi-infarct dementia also. So what are the neurologic manifestation? May be associated migraine, epilepsy, chorea, cerebellar ataxia, and transverse myelopathy. Renal manifestation due to various reasons: renal artery, vein, or glomerular thrombosis, fibrous intima hyperplasia, hematologic manifestation thrombocytopenia, and autoimmune hemolytic anemia. Obstetric manifestation can be preeclampsia or and eclampsia. Fetal manifestation refer to the number of pregnancy. Early fetal loss is less than 10 weeks, late fetal loss 10 weeks, and premature birth among the live births. So what are the treatment? So for prophylaxis, you can give low-dose aspirin or clopidogrel. Those who had thrombosis needs anticoagulation, heparin initially, and later on warfarin therapy with or without aspirin. So, and pregnancy morbidity prevented by combination of heparin with aspirin 80 milligram daily. IVIG 400 per kilogram daily for 5 days may also be used to prevent abortion. These are patients with a known positive antiphospholipid antibody syndrome. So if they become pregnant, you have to give them heparin in combination with aspirin. So these are the low molecular weight heparin. SLE with a passive antiphospholipid antibody should be given aspirin daily as their maintenance. So our patient with SLE nephritis, developing AVN and secondary APS was given 10 milligram prednisone, hydroxychloroquine of 200 milligram, mycophenolate mofetil of 2 grams, aspirin 80 plus warfarin, and calcium plus vitamin D. So patient with SLE may have these several complications, just like in this case, wherein in one patient we see SLE, avascular necrosis, and APS. So this is the end of my lecture. Thank you very much for listening.